Yes. Go on, Giacomo. I know you've got some running experience.
Yeah, well, I I would probably be doing everything you suggest not to. Um, I'm on a 11 and a half year run streak, and right now I'm somewhat tender from almost completing a 200 miler 3 weeks ago.
Amazing.
So my focus now is on a few select ultra marathons between now and the rest of the year, but running every day at the same time.
Wow, amazing. And what's your, I guess, is it a personal question, but how come you've been running for so long? Is there a challenge? Is there a mind? Is it just something you want to overcome yourself?
Oh, I have the utmost respect for people who manage to run 3, 4 times a week because I know if I tried that within a month, I'd stop because I'd start making excuses, the weather, the kids, the work. So I started running every day. Well, 6 months into having started running, I started running every day, and it just works for me because I it takes the decision out of the equation. I've woken up, I'm going for a run.
Fantastic. Brilliant. That's cool. And so, what was the 200 mile that you did last couple?
So it was called the Bridge 200, and it was 50 laps of the old Severn Bridge from Wales to England. I managed 48, went out for the 49th, and then somewhat lost my marbles. My mind went. The body could have done another 8 miles, but I just started hallucinating, and yes, it was good to get home that
I
night.
bet. I bet. Wow, amazing. Thank you for sharing. Is it, I can never pronounce your name right. Maciej?
It's Mache.
Maciej, sorry, buddy. You got any running experience or any or pros or cons, likes, dislikes?
Nothing longer distance. Obviously, through boxing, you should do a lot of more like interval running, uphill sprints, that sort of jazz. 5Ks I was quite good at just because they were obviously a decent length to what, transferability to boxing and whatnot. But yeah, that soon went out the window. The second boxing training stopped. So yeah, just trying to rebuild back up, I guess, in a way. Protect the knees a little bit here and there, and that's that pretty much.
Is there anything that you look kind of hoping to get out of this live?
Do you know what? Just to generally make my lower body a little bit more robust when it comes to running, especially. Since starting football again, so the odd niggle here and there in the knee that you never used to feel, and I'm like, well, I shouldn't be feeling that. I'm only 23. Like, you know what I mean?
100%. No, brilliant. And Karen, if have you are you got any kind of running experience at the moment? I think this
There's
is
something in the chat saying she can listen but can't talk.
from a couple of half marathons, but struggled after 10 miles with injury. Brilliant. Okay. And is there cool, fantastic. And have you got any kind of races coming up, Karen? I'm 56. No, age is no excuse in my eyes. But yeah, we'll discuss it. Yes, the round shuffle run. I think that's in a couple of weeks' time, isn't it? Yeah, brilliant, excellent. Okay, good. So, is there 2 weeks' time? Is there anything you're looking more for specifically out of this chat, Karen? Not just interested. Brilliant. Okay, cool. It makes it nice and easy and non-specific for me at the minute then. And for yourself, Giacomo, is there anything of interest at the minute you'd like to discuss before, or anything you'd like to kind of come away with this?
Well, I've paid my physio more visits in the last 2 months than I had done in the last 3 years. What seems to happen is I go a good couple of years absolutely fine, and then something in the body complains. And he has to get me ready at about 2, 3 weeks' notice before a really long run. And I do often wonder whether mind and body are connected in that respect. Um, but he knows that it's a waste of time telling me not run at all because he knows I'll do at least a mile a day. But I am noticing that recovery isn't what it was 4 or 5 years ago. And so it's really just looking to pick up tips as to what I can do. And like Maciek, it's probably lower body core strength that I need to be looking at, but I'm just looking to dip into the knowledge.
No problem. All right. Well, I'll try my best to kind of cover the three topics in terms of what we got on there. But after kind of each maybe major section, I will come back, and it'll be good to kind of get your guys maybe questions, ideas, feedback, anything like that, and we can kind of make it a bit more interactive. It makes it just flow a bit nicer rather than me just talking to the screen. And if there's any questions whilst I'm going through this, it's either pop it into the chat or I'll bring it back in, and we'll discuss it from there. Is that all right?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, so I think we'll move on now. So first things first, what I like to always do is just a bit of introduction around myself. These are probably just some pictures of just what I get up to kind of outside of the clinic and being the sports therapist. So I guess in terms of information and how I maybe might be a little bit suited around doing this, apart from being just a sports injury specialist, is we've done half marathons, 10 milers. So having understanding around kind of taking part in these activities not only just allows me to maybe look into more deeper around the sport itself, but I can start to relate to those that are taking part in it as well. Whilst I was studying my undergraduate degree in sport and exercise therapy, I was mainly interested in lower body injuries and the prevalence of fatigue and how this accumulates. And then when I went to do my master's degree on strength and conditioning, I started more looking into how endurance has a real impact on how our lower body movement quality is. And as expected, over time, movement quality reduces as we get fatigued, stability decreases, strength decreases, that kind of stuff as well. So I allow that to then come together and shape how we start to prescribe rehabilitation programs, but also injury reduction programs as well. Outside of that, I'm very big into my strength training, and this is what we're dipping into more a little bit later, and how the crossover effect of strength training allows us to reduce injury risk but increase our performance. The bottom right shows what I do on a Saturday morning, and that's going dipping with a group called Sheffield Dippers, where we tour around pretty much the Peak District, taking dips in the rivers, which both shown to have really good outcomes for mental health, but also in terms of recovery as well. And the top left is then just some different challenges we've done in terms of hiking challenges for the Yorkshire Free Peaks, National Free Peaks, and upcoming in the next 4 weeks, I'm cycling to Brussels as well. So just starting to really dip into kind of reaching out into endurance sports and stuff like that. And so here is just a few different pictures of images of some of the stuff that we get up to. We treat a wide range of people, whether they're doing running, which is one of my favorite parts of aspects, because it's not just one simple fix is going to solve a solution to someone's problems. It's looking more holistically around their recovery, the performance training, and how they're actually planning out their program as well. We've got stuff from here where we've got some sprinters, which is a different type of kettle of fish. But it's about just understanding the sport itself, and then how we can then shape the strategies that we put in place, whether that's just soft tissue work, whether that's strength training, whether that's balance and Pilates and yoga stuff, or it's really just honing on to their sport and helping them plan it a bit more effectively. And we do this by really simplifying the two models around sport and exercise therapy, which in layman's terms is basically physiotherapy for those that do sport. And then also strength conditioning. So strength conditioning is the aspect of developing characteristics to a certain discipline. So that could be strength, mobility, muscular endurance, cardio itself, everything like that. And it's about understanding how we then layer that in over time. So the second that I like to kind of put out to everyone, so you can pop it into the chat feature if you want, or shout out loud. How do you think injuries are caused?
Could you say tightness, imbalance, and weaknesses?
Yeah, it can certainly be. Yeah. Karen, have you got any ideas around how injuries can be caused? Overuse, brilliant. And Giacomo, if you're probably dealing with a dishwasher at the minute, but we'll come back to it. But yeah, you're both pretty much kind of hit the nail on the head. Overuse is a really important factor, and there's something that we see a lot in, especially novice runners who've got the ambition to go out, but then it's not about how they're managing it overall. And then from that, what we can then find out is then they've got imbalances, they are weaker in some areas, which is then putting more strain in these areas, and kind of just leads into a circle from there. And a real kind of simple way that I like to do it in terms of looking at overuse is often done by moving too soon after doing too little for too long. And this is when we really look into more novice areas and understanding that. And sometimes people can come and see me and it's not about me doing the massage or prescribing exercise. Sometimes, if you could just see my whiteboard on here, which we've done some clients, is going, right, show me what your weekly schedule looks like. Tell me what events you've got coming up. And then sometimes just by rescheduling what they're doing, giving them some tips around how they can kind of manage their workload around running, sometimes things can clear up themselves. So sometimes that's where we look into both performance training, but also the recovery aspect as well. So just a little run through in terms of what we're going to be doing this evening. We're going to look at some kind of quick biomechanics around running, some common misconceptions, some issues and remedies, some tips around how to reduce your injury risk. And then if you are looking for support for an upcoming event or just in terms of reducing injury, then we can share some ways in terms of how we've helped some clients and how we can help you as well. So any questions so far, guys, before I move on? A couple of seconds. No. So what I'll do is I'll start making a move on and then we'll kind of break it down from there. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss really is the actual kind of technique and mechanics of how we run. And it's important for us to maybe understand the cycles of running and then how this then relates to how we can reduce injury risk over time. So what we're basically breaking it down to is absorption and propulsion of when we're running. So we actually become airborne for a very short moment in time when we're running, and that's during the cycle of how the legs change from contact down to recovery and swinging through after there. So if we understand how the mechanics of running works, we can then start to then prescribe injury rehabilitation programs or even performance programs to be able to meet those demands. So the first part, if we're looking at more of the absorption, the stance phase, is we're looking at how we contact the ground. Then as we transition through to coming off into the float, is understanding the forces that are at play around the lower body. Obviously, predominantly, we tend to find a lot of injuries happen around either the Achilles tendon or around the knee, which tends to be patella tendon as well. And that patella tendon attaches the kneecap to the shin bone. And so when we're prescribing things, we need to maybe widen the scope. So sometimes when people come to me, I look about how their moving quality for a movement screen. We then start to discuss around the injuries, the aches and pains, how long they've been there. And then sometimes you might then get them onto the treadmill because you might be able to get someone stronger, but maybe if their foot contact's not right, if they're overstriding too much, this is going to put other external forces at play. And then that's where the long-term games around trying to correct technique or trying to just change little small minute factors may have a play over time. This obviously comes down to how long you're working with a client and how we go from there. But yeah, so as we go down, we'll land with one leg. We've got call this process absorption. So we've got loads of forces that are going through the body, it'll then go through the ground. And then what we then have is the propulsion phase, is as the energy then recoils through the ground and through our lower body, we basically push away and that allows us to spring. So the load the Achilles tendon has is really high here. And depending on how slow we're running, how fast we're running is going to make a factor of how much load is going through that tendon, but then also it changes around how we're going up or downhill. If we're going uphill, it's going to have more of a calf and a glute loading factor. When we're going downhill, as many people notice, the knees take a hammering. So the patella tendons and the quadricep tendons take a lot of hammering because we're de-accelerating as we're going down. So that kind of, without trying to overcomplicate that, is just really understanding how we do that and how the foot placement and the strength and exercises take matter from there. We can then start to look at this real deeper if we want to, but I'm not going to delve into this too deep. But as this running seems to be quite easy for some people and hard for other people, what we understand is this step rate and step time is influenced by many factors underneath us. And so having a program that's designed, if we're quite new to it, or if we want to really develop our performance, is looking at how we can kind of tick off different segments of this, from here. So it might be improving or decreasing flight time. It might be decreasing the stance time that we've got in there as well. And this can then be taken down to touchdown distance, foot movement distance, and takeoff distance here as well. This is more of an understanding around the science behind it, but then if you're finding the right coach or therapist around you, they can really start to dig down and understand why you got these injuries occurring. For Giacomo, maybe your therapist or coach, they could be doing some small tweaks, or it might mean that prescribing some exercises might help you when you come into different cycles of training. I think, as you said before, you're doing ultra marathons. So it might mean that you segment different training blocks to allow you to recover in loads whilst you're recovering from an event, and then preparing you for another event as well from there. So I won't delve too far deep into that, but it's just, I think, a really good tool or an idea to understand how complicated running can be. And sometimes it's not like just putting your shoes on and going out the door. And so a real simple thing that I like to understand for people to do this, and the biggest thing we have around runners is understanding or even maybe wanting to do strengthening exercises, because it's not as fun as being outdoors or in the open. And so I like to really kind of break this down to kind of 3 segments that we want to understand. So the first part is understanding strength. Can each muscle group or segment of the lower body, are they strong within the needs or capacities that need to be having? So again, how much muscle endurance goes for each muscle group in terms of the calves, the hamstrings, the quads, the glutes? Are they doing all the work they need to be doing? We then look at stiffness, and stiffness is an important factor during running. So we tend to find that runners have poor ankle mobility, maybe tight hamstrings. And the reason why we've got this is because we've got high stiffness because of the amount of forces that are going through the lower body. If they're all laxed, then what tends to happen is we could obviously cause dislocations or anything major around that. But if we're nice and stiff and tight in the tendons, you're going to be hitting the ground harder, which means you can then spring off a lot easier. So this comes a massive play into understanding how we load the tendons within the gym so they become stiff and hard. So when we're running, there's no lack in terms of what we're doing from there. And if we look into the bottom part here, which is more of the underlining, the more of the foundation work that's not so fun, is understanding how we're moving in terms of flexibility, mobility, and balance. Flexibility is important because we want to have a nice long stride if we're going for fast ranges. If we're going for more stuff like ultras, we don't need to have too flexible, but we need to make sure we're strong and stable. So mobility is the ability of the joint to move as freely as possible. Flexibility is about the muscles and tendons being long enough to allow you to get that full range. And then finally, balance is there because it's a single leg sport. We always land on one leg at a time. So therefore, are our hips, our ankles, our knees, are they stable enough to withstand not only the terrain, but being able to recover quickly from each stride as well. So just a bit of an insight. It can kind of just feed a bit of a framework in terms of what we're looking at. So is there any questions on any of those points that we just raised there, guys?
No questions.
No? Karen?
Some familiar terms, but no questions.
Unfamiliar or familiar?
No, familiar.
Brilliant. Okay, I don't think Karen's put anything in the chat, so we'll keep going. So the next part in here is oh, she's got something on there now. What we got? I'm interested in ankle stiffness. Is there a certain area why you're interested in ankle stiffness, Karen? I think it's an issue for me. Is that from kind of previous injuries? Is it like ankle sprains, rolled ankles, or anything like that? Must be something to pick up on there. Okay, no problem. That's fine. Okay, cool. So I'm going to run over things. So Giacomo, maybe this isn't reference for you as such, but it might give some insight into some aspects around recovery. So a common thing that novice people come in to see me is they've read stuff online and they think they need to be running every day to get better. And a real kind of simple aspect around it is learning how the body recovers. Apologies for the blurriness of this. And the sideways aspect. But what we're looking at in terms of being able to improve performance is being able to load the body up so it can have a stimulus to adapt, and then we need to give it enough time for recovery for that stimulus to grow within the body and that adaptation to occur. So that means by starting off is this line in the middle, this black line is our baseline. So that's our current fitness level. Now, if we load the body, it has an element of fatigue, and that fatigue is that stimulus. So if we give it an adequate time for recovery, which could be 1 to 2 to 3 days, what we find is in that adaptation occurs. We then have a process called supercompensation, which is basically the body thanking us for that recovery. It gives us a boost of performance. So then if we give it adequate time before we start loading it, and then we give that training effect, we'll get some more fatigue. But you can see that fatigue is less than last time. As then we give that enough recovery, we get that supercompensation to follow. So often this might be the tendons that are recovering, the muscles recovering, getting stronger, or it's the nervous system being able to deal with that. So if we look into the other effects of maybe doing it too much and not allowing appropriate recovery, what we tend to find is if we load it up with the training session number 1, but we don't give it that time of that super compensation factor that we spoke about a second ago, and we load it again, we're bringing this fatigue marker down. And if we don't then recover optimally within that, we then bring that fatigue marker down again and again as such. And then we come into this danger area of overtraining or overreaching. And this simply means that we're putting too much stimulus for the body to load and to be able to adapt. It then goes over, and then it can cause common injuries such as tendinopathies, muscle strains, and more instability around the body as well. So as a factor, Giacomo will probably be slightly different, but you can understand how maybe he's now starting to see effects of overtraining because some injuries start to occur and niggles, and therefore it might mean that some factors of recovery doesn't mean you might have long days, short days, you might have some stuff on the treadmill or stuff like that. It might be some factors that he plays around just to change the load of intensities that's going on there. The other factor is, and this is a bit more of an entertaining area, is you don't need to run a certain way because all our bodies are different, because our statures are different. I think Giacomo's just coming back in there. Because our body shape's different, because how we land, the train we're on, the shoes that we wear, so much is different and varied within individuals when they're running. So being able to get everyone to run the same way is very hard. It also takes a very long time to correct form. And so what I have in this video here, it just kind of highlights the different factors that we have. Is that working? There we go. So here's just some different types of running forms that we often see. I'd be quite interested to see, put a number in which one you think is more like you when you're running. Is there a close link to what you might all find in terms of your running, in terms of postures? No? Are you all there? Daydreamer. Excellent. Did you see all those, Giacomo? No? Used to be quite bouncy in my run. Maybe a little less stiffer now then.
Yeah, definitely a lot stiffer these days.
Brilliant. Cool. So next point I'd like to look at is then I'm too old to run. It will potentially give me arthritis, and I think this is more the people that I see maybe in their kind of 40s going into their 50s. After that, I think those that run after their 50s tend to be pretty good when they're being resilient to the force of running. But a quick insight in terms of to arthritis and how it plays, and maybe the misconception here is arthritis, it's not given from running as such. There's lots and lots of research out there that shows that the bone density that is developed from running actually improves the outcomes of it. So arthritis is basically a bit of an autoimmune disease where it basically starts to eat down at itself. So the bone density reduces, the cartilage health reduces, the bone-on-bone contact then starts to cause that inflammation around the bone. It then stops recovering. So we've got within our bones osteoclasts and osteoblasts, and each one are taking processes of breaking bone down and then building bone back up. That's constantly recycling. If over time that is not managed appropriately, then we can get those aspects. And more, we look into more the osteoarthritis in the middle picture, where we see that healthy cartilage that's separating the bones to allow them to glide is broken down. We then get that inflammation. The more the rheumatoid arthritis is a more severe aspect of the osteoblasts are no longer rebuilding. And so therefore the joints are then starting to really damage themselves. And that's where you might tend to see joint replacement starts to occur. They get rid of the bone that's kind of really fallen behind and putting on metal caps and stuff like that. But the research out there now is showing that appropriate loading, either strength training or in combination with running, starts to improve the factors of how bone health is, and therefore the longevity of people can tend to take part in running for longer. And this was shown in a continuous study which looked at the ages of people and then how these have increased over time. So on the bottom left picture, obviously park run is growing more and more familiar, I think, as time goes on. We can tend to find at the ages of 60 to 69, especially over the past kind of 30 odd years, is still growing very slowly. So those that are in those older demographics as such are taking more activity, and they are running because I guess the understanding around injuries, rehabilitation, but also the benefits of running is there as well. And on the right picture, when I think it's looking at marathons, we can start to see that there's still a steady kind of participant rate of marathons. And again, I think that's down to understanding how the benefits of running is, and it's not detrimental to people's health as long as they've got the appropriate guidance to allow them to get to that. Where is my mouse? There it is. And again, running is bad for my knees is often what we hear for people that are new to running, maybe don't enjoy running, probably run too fast when they first start. And that's where we can start to look at. But this is where we start to want to understand the intensities of what go through the lower body, especially around the knees, and then how we can then prescribe exercise to load this up. So this study was done in 2014, 2016. There's probably more out there currently now, but it's just a very nice graph and representation of understanding how much force is going through the body. So as I've highlighted here, when people describe of knee pain when they're runners and they're going up or down the stairs, we're putting 3 to 4 times our body weight through each limb. When we're running, depending obviously on the speed and the training and whatever event is going on, but we can be taking 4.5 to 7.6 times our body weight through the patellofemoral joint. So patellofemoral joint is the femur, which is the upper thigh bone, and then your patella is your kneecap. So if you're understanding those loads on there, when we're starting to screen people, can they do a simple thing such as a wall sit? So a wall sit is one of my favorite exercises to do. One, to use as a screening tool, but used for recovery or rehabilitation tool with major tendons. So the isometric capability of it can load up the tendon without changing the length of the tendon. So the only irritation is the intensity of the exercise. Over time, as pain reduces, function returns, we can then start to make that difficult by doing stuff like elevated heel squats, lunges, etc., etc. So as we're dealing with injury, is understanding, okay, here's the current movement capabilities that we need for the sport. We understand the load that's needed. And if we're then testing appropriately, we can understand, right, excellent. We know they're here now, and I'd like them to get to this point, and how do we get to there from there? And that comes into the process of understanding what's going on a bit more. So then that comes into the aspects around strength training. So we know that it can help reduce injury risk. We know it can rehabilitate, and we know it can improve performance. And this is done whether we're looking at balance, strength, improving reaction times, speed and efficiency of recovery, especially during the gait, increased confidence, allowed to push themselves more further, but then obviously decreasing unnecessary stress from certain body parts, i.e. it might be the lower limb or the upper limb. Another factor that we like to look at when we're looking at around injury recovery, injury rehabilitation, or even just prevention of injuries, is a lot of people that when they've got a niggle or an ankle pain, they go straight to stretch it. And really, we need to understand what the injury is and then how we manage it from there. So a really good way I like to kind of explain this is thinking about our muscles and tendons as like a piece of string or a rope. Now, on the second picture, if you say there's a minor tear or minor injury, the tendon might be a bit more pissed off. If we're already kind of fraying or tearing on a really cellular level, why would we then go and try and stretch that? Because all we're going to do, if we look onto the next image, is pull it and more aggravate it more. And then at one point, not to say that we're going to absolutely rupture it, but we can see how that intensity of the injury can really escalate. When we know if we've got tendon injuries, we don't want to be stretching and putting too much load during its function. Let's just load it. Let's get the tolerance and the capacity level to increase. We can then start to play around with how we do that from there. So and that's the same way as if you're dealing with a hamstring strain. So you've pulled a hamstring, you've pulled your calf. First few days, all we need to do is just reduce the noise, get the swelling down, get the function coming back. We get it strong, then stretch it when it's strong. And then that way, the recovery process is a lot quicker. Rather than, oh, that's really tight, I've just pulled it, I'm just going to go and stretch it for 5 minutes and then limping around for an extended period of time. So that's my 2 pence on stretching. So stretching can't prevent injury. What it can do is improve our muscle length. If done repetitively, it can improve our joint of range of motion because we can access more of the joint capsule, increase our body awareness, our breathing patterns. It also increase our balance and also those unnecessary stress. If we know we're going, okay, and previously they were tight here and here and here. Let's improve those areas. That way the muscles and tendons can function a lot better, which then in time can reduce the future injury risk as well. Any questions on that, guys?
No, resonates.
No? Brilliant. So in terms of how we can then reduce injury risk, prevent injury, depending on how you want to put it, we need to understand more holistically now what's going on. The strength and conditioning, as I said, it was the factors that we looked at in terms of being able to make sure there's less unnecessary stress on certain structures, that load tolerance and capacity is there. But then we need to then look at how recovery happens. And this really closely aligns with the nutrition. Protein intake is going to be super important because if we've got enough protein in the body, we've got the building blocks there to make sure the muscles and tendons and everything else is staying nice and healthy. Hydration is going to be a massive thing as well. Obviously, the more endurance running you're doing, the more important the water is to be managed over time, but also outside of that as well, making sure that everything's working really well on a cellular level. But then when we're looking more into recovery methods, we need to be understanding how, as much as loading is important, are we recovering enough to allow that adaptation from the loading? And if we're not, that's where accumulation over time can then be a factor for that. And that's where we want to look at more around remedies and how that links with it. So this might be something, I don't know if you do long-term training programs, Giacomo?
No, as in I know, I know in my mind roughly what I should be doing, and I don't tie myself on a daily basis to a plan.
Brilliant. Okay. So, and this is something where it might be a useful tool to plan at the start of the year. So you're going to be running for the year, and then you're going to be going, all right, I've got events here and here and here. I really like when we're working with clients is mapping this out. So it doesn't have to be a week by week thing, but it's understanding a month to month where, okay, we're going to be pushing super hard for an ultra event, for example, 200 miles. Was it 200 miles or 200 kilometers?
Yeah, 200 miles.
So therefore, you're building up towards that. If you can look on here, so this is a very rough marathon plan. I just put on as a representation here. It will fluctuate client to client. We know that you're going to have a huge accumulation phase here with your running to allow you to get to those demands. So then, therefore, over this period after where you've been doing it, you're more than likely not going to be running as far as you was before, because we need to bring the nervous system down. Obviously, you said before you kind of you was hallucinogenic and stuff like that. So therefore, we know that the body's taking a real big hit. So we need to take some time for recovery. So you'll probably bring that mileage down. And then it might be in this September, October, November time where you're going to be coming to another competition. So therefore, we then start to look at maybe increasing that volume over time in terms of distance. Yeah. These two bits under here is the more of the prescription that we have when we're doing strength training. When we're looking at high volume of running, we don't want to be loading the body up with high volume strength exercises because the fatigue is going to be super high within the muscles and tendons. Therefore, our injury risk could increase. So when we're looking at exercise prescription, if you're going to do a very high training volume load, so for example, you're close to marathon, you'll find that your repetitions, which is this first segment here, is going to be low, but your exercise intensity is going to be super high here. And that's because what we're doing is we're loading up tissues to be strong and resilient, but keeping the fatigue markers really low down. When we come into the areas where we've got little running, for example. So for example, in this block here, we've got high volume, high intensity. Sorry. High volume, low intensity. So therefore, we've got more reps. The weight's probably going to be more fatiguing and very sore on the muscle groups because we're starting to build up resilience and capacity for those tendons to develop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I messed up a little bit, but the idea is when running volume's high, exercise volume is low. And then when running volume's low, your exercise volume is high. And that's because we've got different characteristics that we're trying to develop. Now, the other thing that we put on here that I've not put on the bottom here is we have things called plyometrics. So plyometrics is about how we absorb force and how we propel force. If you think way back to slide 1, when I said as the foot hits the ground, we're absorbing force. As we then leave the ground, we're propelling ourselves. So plyometrics is a mixture of jumping, leaping, bounding, and landing. And depending on where you are in your training cycle, or depending on how much you've got onto it, and maybe with the exercise selection you've got. So for example, when we're looking at this high running volume phase, we're going to be wanting some very quick, speedy type drills. So we've got things called pogos and skipping. They're very quick and hard. But where we're working in terms of a lower volume stuff, where we want to increase power output, we then might do very slower stuff. So like counter movement jumps, where you're generating a lot more force. There's a lot of a slower movement. And then we cycle that as your training changes. And this might be, Giacomo, where you might be noticing these niggles and stuff like that, is maybe the capacity's not been built earlier on in the season. So therefore, as we're running and getting fatigued, that tolerance to load is then decreasing over time as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think in my case it's more often than not overtraining, but yeah.
Yeah. So then if we're knowing overtraining wise, it's then how do we be smart around the exercise prescription that we've got to allow you to have enough but not too much and make sure those tendons are staying nice and healthy. Yeah. Any questions on that, guys?
Nope.
Cool. So here's quite a fun slide that I kind of put together and looking at around how we recover well. And it's never just one thing that's allowed to recover, it's multiple things. So the top 3 I've put on there is basically just the kind of real ones, making sure we're eating loads. So Giacomo, if you're running every day, I'm expecting that you should be eating fairly few good 1,000 calories each day. Maybe not. I don't know if you're still there. As well as that is understanding how we're moving. So if we're looking at recovery, we want to be looking at active recovery. So low intensity, it might be cycling, it might be walking, it might be doing some fun stuff like yoga, etc. Just allowing us to promote blood flow, keep moving, allow the nervous system to be on a low intensity and just control, and doing that. The other part which is really important, is sleep, and making sure we have enough good quality sleep, and making sure we've got blacked out rooms. There's obviously all that common stuff around reducing blue light, etc. But we know that sleep has a really important factor on recovery. And if we're not moving correctly, if we're not eating enough, then it tends to take a real big hit on our sleep. The other factors around is stress as well. So we do know that those that have high stress are going to have increased cortisol levels, which has been shown to have really detrimental effects on having sleep. And so we need to make sure where we can, obviously stress is good and bad. Where we've got bad stress, where there's too much stress, we need to make sure we've got some strategies in place that allow us to do that. That means maybe having time away by ourselves, finding a really good hobby where you can kind of just switch off and just focus on those things. Is a real good aspect to make a start. The other part on here we've got is stretching. So understanding the benefits of stretching and where to strategically put it will allow us to do it. Again, runners don't like to really stretch that much repeatedly. So it might mean that we try and find one session a week where they have a really good 20 to 30 minute session where they're stretching factors that they know are going to be areas that they need of concern. So that could be maybe hamstrings, hip flexors, calves, that kind of stuff as well. They're kind of going towards the bottom now, cold and heat. Again, loads and loads more research, understanding around the benefits of cold therapy, especially cold water therapy. And that might mean ice baths, ice showers, cold showers, that kind of stuff. Understanding how we can strategically put those into the program where it doesn't give us a detrimental effects on our performance gain, but also allowing us to recover well. For example, I have an ice bath every other day. And that's a real key aspect around my recovery. Then heat, which is another big thing at the minute, is around saunas, hot tubs, that kind of stuff, allowing us to vasodilate, increase blood flow, and allow us to recover better. Then the last part that down at the bottom is more looking around just real being able to switch off. That means might be having a cheeky beer at the weekend, might be just sitting at home and not doing anything and just sitting on your backside, and just bringing all those fatigue markers down over time. Any questions?
No, we're all good for now. Yeah.
Cool. So I'll just roll through these last couple of bits now. So the last bit when we're understanding around injury and how this correlates in running is understanding the pyramid that we focus a lot of our assessments on, but then how we then generate programs. And this really looks at foundations, so mobility and flexibility. Have we got appropriate levels of that? Then are we stable in these range of motions? And then from there, we can then start to put the icing on the cake and understanding how the strength is from there. So a real quick aspect that we look at when we're looking for screening this is mobility and flexibility. Is there enough in the hips, the lower back, the hamstrings, and the quads? This allows us to make sure they're opening up really well in the hips. Are we then stable in the hips, core, and ankles, which is going to allow us to transfer force suitably, but also being able to just withstand it and making sure we're on our feet. And then finally, I would generate enough strength for our glutes, our quads, our hamstrings, our calves to allow us to be driving repeatedly on every step. I'm just waiting. Giacomo's coming back in. I think Giacomo's in. So as I just quickly put into this slide here, Giacomo, I just missed a little bit from there.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right, no problem. So this quick image on the left here is a framework in which we use to follow when we're screening, but also prescribing exercise. Are we adequately got enough mobility and flexibility as a foundation? So are our hips, our lower back, our hamstrings, our quads, are they opening as much as we want to allow us to get full range and full strides? Are we then stable in this range of motion that we've got from the hips, the core, and the ankles to allow us to absorb and propel force efficiently, but also being able to obviously stay upright? And then finally, once we've done those two bottom layers, can we then generate enough force and strength through glutes, quads, hamstrings, and calves repeatedly for the certain discipline that we've got in terms of whether it's a marathon or a 5K or a sprint, for example? And so that's where I'm going to kind of bring this back to you guys for attending is, well, we've generated a quick workout plan, which takes a factor in how we prescribe exercises. Yeah. This is going to be a mix of strength, bit of stability work, and a bit of plyometrics. So something real simple, that's body weight that you can do at home, that's just nice and quick, that you can do once or twice a week. It should just help you understand a bit more, okay, this could help here, and this is why I'm going to do this. So what I'll do after this, because I've got everyone's emails, is I'll send this out, and then hopefully you can kind of give it a go from there, and then give us some feedback, and maybe we can discuss a few more points specific to you as and when we need to. Any questions on those 2 bits I just went over there? No?
No, that all ties in with what I've been told over the years. I just need to start listening.
That's the hub. So this will maybe come into understanding of what we can strategically fit in your week. So it's not as much of a time drain, because that's the biggest thing that we see around is people go, yeah, I know I need to do it, but I just don't have the time. Okay, so how do we put that into a start of a run? How do we put that into the end of a run? How do we tweak it? You can do it whilst the kettle's on. Does that make sense? It's playing a bit more strategic around there. So other areas that we can kind of point over in terms of how we can reduce injury risk is one, planning out your running schedule. So that can be on a macro scale, so a year long to quarterly to monthly to weekly, for example, and going from there. Making sure allowing for appropriate deload and rest weeks. So as kind of mentioned before in the running schedule, a deload tends to be just a rest week or a rest period, for example. So it might be a reduced running volume for you, Giacomo. It might, we'll be looking at different areas. If we're doing boxing, how do we fit that in terms of different phases of boxing that you might be going through as well? Apply appropriate strength and flexibility. I think the biggest misconception is it's going to take a lot of time to do these type of things, but we can really wrap them up into a short program as long as we're taking into the factors that need to be doing and prioritizing it to different phases of running where we are. Prioritizing recovery and nutrition. So as I said on the other slide, making sure we're eating plenty, making sure we're getting downtime, and making sure we're focused on areas that are important to the time and schedule you're at. Warming up and cooling down is I put it on as a short post because I know we're going to be having time for now. But warm up needs to be appropriate. So you only need to do 4 or 5 movements that are specific to running that you're doing. It doesn't need to be this super 10-minute long thing that we've got because we don't have the time to do it. So how do we really break it down? It's about getting the heart elevated for a minute or 2. It's then activating the muscle groups that we've got. So calves, it could be quick calf raises on the curb. It can be some air squats and a forward lunge. It can be real simple like that. And then some pogos or some hopping where we're activating the lower body to be able to absorb and propel. It can be really simple as that. So 5 movements, you could be done within 2 to 3 minutes, and then you can then really get going. Then other than that, if you're looking onto a wider scale, are we looking at running mechanics, and have we got a coach or someone that understands movement quality and can give you really specific things that you can take away and go from there. So just a quick whistle stop tour. So maybe some things for you to think about, take some notes on, and we can go from there. And then I'll quickly just share just some quick stories where I've helped clients. So this client, Ali, she had a meniscal tear on her knee. If you don't know what a meniscus is, it's about a shock absorber pad that goes between the shin bone and the thigh bone. And this can often be if you have a quick turn or over time you've just been rubbing, we get tears on here. So once she had surgery, we then started to look at how her running was because she was getting loads of pain after post-surgery. And we could tell between her left leg is on the left side, right leg is on the right side. You can see how her foot striking is a lot different. Okay, the right foot was the leg with the meniscal tear. So what was happening is she wasn't heel striking, she was flat foot striking, but she wasn't flat foot striking underneath her center of mass, which means she's then taken no stress through the ankle, but all the stress was coming from the knee, and she's almost hitting and then dragging backwards. Whereas on her left side, we've got a nice heel contact. Her Achilles is taking up some of that force, and as she's then working through and running off, it was a lot less clumpy. So with appropriate understanding around how she's landing, we then changed her strength exercises, increased the range of motion around her hips, and then over time that allowed her to do her first ever marathon at the ripe age of 50, which was really good. And then for Natalie here, so she had an ACL rupture. If you guys know what that is, it's one of your major ligaments that's within your knee. This was due down to a netball accident that she had. And she came to me post-surgery. She was having real crap rehabilitation. Once we're understanding a movement quality, we then discussed a goal, and our goal was to do the Sheffield 10K to raise money for cancer for her mum. So once we set that goal in mind, we then reversed, okay, what do we need? We need to make sure you can load the knee, you know that you're strong, and then we then slowly built up her running. So a real simple method, got on the couch to 5K. She gently increased the running over time. We then increased her strength and stability around the hips and the knees. And then she managed to do the 10K, which is excellent. So some real good kind of history. As you can tell, I really like knees because knees are major factors around it, but we've treated many things around Achilles, hips, hip flexors, and stuff like that. But the same model comes by. Where is their movement quality like at the bottom? Are they stable? Are they strong? And then we then look at that goal and basically reverse engineer from there. And that's just by using the simple method that we've got here. So just to kind of wrap up from there, gents, thank you for your time this evening. If you are looking for any coaching around movement quality, screening how you're moving, and then discussing how we can then work together in the future, we've got two aspects that we deliver that here. We do this fully online, which means we'll have a quick consultation. We'll get you to do a movement screen online, and then we can then set up a 4-week rolling program. Or if you want just a program on its own, we'll have a quick consultation and then we develop a program around that. Or if you are local to Sheffield, then we can do that in more in person. We can get a real more hands-on approach and understanding how your movement quality is. And then we can then discuss whether you need strength training, which is not just going to be at home, to making sure we've got appropriate loading going through, and then discussing how we move on from there. So I've got 2 spaces available, which is not just pointed out because there's 2 of you left on the call now. But if you do want to have a bit more of a chat around your running, your recovery, your injuries, or anything like that, then I'll be more than open to have a conversation with you after this live. But for that, gents, have you got any questions for me that you want to kind of go back to?
I've got something's come to mind because of one of the last things you showed, Rory. The first example of the different